It's 2:30. We have a quorum. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Pledge of allegiance, please. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, welcome everyone to the April meeting of Tampa Historic Streetcar. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to be heard today? If not, let's move to election of officers. Who is the chairman of that nominating committee?
That would be me, Mr. Chair.
Would you care to make your report?
I would be happy to make the report, although I didn't write them all down, but I think I can remember most of it. So the committee met with Director Hamilton and Director Ahern and myself, and we went over the board positions, and so the nominations. This is there we go. And so the nominating committee would like to present to the board for consideration for the board commission positions the following people, the following board members. Do I do them all at once, Lena? Is that proper? Okay. For the position of president and chair, nominating committee presents Michael English for consideration. For the position of vice president, the nominating committee presents Abby Doring-Ahern. And for the position of secretary treasurer, the nominating committee presents Mickey Jacob for consideration. I think the proper procedure would be to package all those in one vote. Would that be appropriate, sir?
I believe so. Yes.
Nominating committee report.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Thank you so much. Approval of minutes, if you've had a chance to read them.
We're not done yet.
Oh,
sir.
I'm sorry,
If
Hal.
I may.
I'm sorry. Whoops.
If I might continue.
You may.
Okay, so we have three committees that we also were asked to review for members to make nominations for. The first would be the marketing committee. The nominating committee recommends the following nominations for the marketing committee. Make sure I get this right. That would be Director Robinson, Director English, Director Suarez, Director Bowers, Director. Oh, that's what it is. Thank you. Okay, I go back. We recommend Director Hamilton, Director English, Director Doring-Ahern, Director Bowers, Director Suarez, and Director Robinson to sit on that committee. That's our recommendation to the board as a nominating committee.
Do you recommend a chair?
We do not. It's my understanding from Lena that the chair is elected by the committee at the first meeting of the committee.
Great. Motion to this recommendation?
I move to accept that recommendation.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay.
Okay. Next, we have the Finance Committee. The nominating committee presents to the board for consideration the following members of the Finance Committee: Director Jacob, Director McDonough, Director Suarez, Director English, and Director Bowers.
Great. Motion?
I motion to accept the nominees as presented.
Second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Thank you.
And finally, we have the MPO Technical Advisory Committee, which consists of one member and one alternate. The nominating committee presents for consideration Director English to be the member and the alternate to be Director Jacob.
Okay. I'll do that.
Thank you.
I go, so
Right.
it's mildly interesting.
I move to accept that recommendation.
Second.
Okay. Motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay.
And that concludes our report, Mr. Chair.
Nice work. Thank you so much. Now I will proceed. With the approval of minutes,
Move approval.
Second.
we have a motion and a second. Any additions, deletions, or corrections? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Great. We've taken public input. Mr. Bracken, the streetcar system report.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, board members. We had a pretty good month again last month. 2,683.75 trips performed, which put us at about a 99.7% deliverance of service. We had just a few service interruptions during that period. Most were due to mechanical and some service interruptions due to blockage on our tracks. Our biggest event for the month of March was the Ybor Spa fires. 2 consecutive weekends, the building was set on fire by arson. The second one was the most major one, which shut down about 3 o'clock. Our staff had to come in and shut down the power. We weren't able to restore the power until about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, about 3:30. During that time, we did provide a bus bridge for our passengers up on the north end. We were able to maintain service from 7th Avenue southbound, so we were able to keep the cars going from there on down. We did provide the ADA bus bridge loading for wheelchairs during that event at the barn as well, so nobody was impacted with that interruption. Major events, we had a couple parades during March as well. St. Patrick's Day Parade and the Pride Festival Parade, which caused some shutdown of the north of 7th Avenue as well for those 2 events. So no accidents. Happy to report no more accidents. Our last one was back in December, so we've got a really good safe record going on, and we're hopefully we'll continue that for you. And for the month, we had a total of 41 wheelchair boardings, which is up there a little bit more than what we normally see. So they are out there riding as well. And PMs, we did 18 during the month of it out there. So outside your window today, you'll see the first of our new AC components on the car. We're still working on the interior components, getting that, because it's kind of the model of the things that's coming. We just awarded the air compressor contract out, so those will be coming into production here in the next few months. We have 3 air conditioners already built. One is installed, one is on property, and one is in shipping, because we just don't have a lot of room to store those. So those will be going on. 433 will be the next car. The roof will be done, and that air conditioning will be put on there. So hopefully in the next few months, once we get our new air compressors out, the first car will be going out with the new air compressor unit, the new air conditioning unit, and some new technologies that we're putting on there. We're also wiring it now for the toll authorities autonomous vehicle project tracking. So that wiring is going in on that vehicle as well. So that will be the first one that's being wired for that as well. So a lot of things going, and we're trying to keep it rolling.
That's great. Any questions? It's a great report. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay.
Legal and legislative reports. Mr. Smoker?
All quiet on the legal front.
Good, thank you. The only thing I really have to report is that I was asked by a couple of people in the community leaders kind of people, that they had heard that crossing the railroad tracks on Polk Street going north would be a problem. They'd heard it would be a problem. Our insurance agent has assured us that our policy would permit a second crossing. So I called him, Grant Melnick, and asked him to write a memo to that effect. When I receive it, I'll send it to Catherine. She can distribute it. Bob probably needs to see it. And I'm going to ask that he make a copy of the CSX policy, as well as this memo, available to the consultants doing the extension study. I've seen a draft, and it's a little vague, and it can always change, but I'm going to produce what he gives me and send it to you and to the consultants. Bob?
They probably raised that question because there was a quote in the newspaper from the CSX government affairs rep who claimed that CSX was unaware of this and had an issue with a streetcar crossing of Polk. And that's probably why people asked that question.
Well,
It was based on a comment made by CSX.
Well, the policy, yeah, and I wouldn't be surprised if we end up negotiating with them again unless DOT can help us. But nevertheless, I'm going to send out some assurances that we believe exist in our current policy. So for whatever good that is, we'll see.
Current policy covers their system.
It does. And, maybe they haven't read our new policy. They certainly should have, but that's what it says.
We can provide them.
Yeah, and that when the time comes, we'll do that. That's all I have to report. You're not Miss Egan, so
No.
I don't know who you are, but please introduce yourself.
I'm Kenyatta Lee. I'm the Chief Administrative Officer.
That's
for
great.
HART.
And you're here to make the director's report?
No, there is no report.
There's no report.
Thank you.
It's nice to have
I'm
you.
the CAO. She's
It's
the
nice
CAO.
to
so
have,
thank you.
It's nice to have you with us.
May I jump
Sure.
in on your report, Mr.
Yeah,
Chair?
please.
I shared this with our committee members, our nominated committee members, but Greg, I wanted to let you know and congratulate you on the performance of your motormen on the streetcar. We had an experience this weekend. My wife and I rode the streetcar to Ybor for dinner, and we rode it back, and on the way back we got on with a couple with a young family, and they had a little girl, and she was probably, I'm guessing, 6 or 7 years old. And it was her first streetcar ride. And she was so excited, and your motorman was absolutely fabulous. I mean, he talked to her, asked her all kinds of questions, her name, where she's from, is she excited? He let her put her own ticket in so she could put her ticket in on her first ride. And it was just a wonderful experience. We got off, and she was at the window waving to us. And, it's just things like that make this all worthwhile. But I wanted to congratulate you and share that with you, because I think that's an example of what we do here at HART and the kind of community outreach that we have. So it was a lovely, lovely experience.
Excellent. Please.
I did forget one thing. We are conducting our final interview of the Director of Streetcar Operations on Tuesday. So everything going well, and Ms. Kenyatta gives him the job offer. We'll hopefully come back to you with some good news next month.
Well, you've already been good news, Greg, so.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, so we have a presentation coming from Mr. Campillo on our sort of preliminary budget considerations.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon. Lucian Campillo. I'm the Senior Manager of the Project Management Office. Forgive my voice. I'm kind of battling a cold right now, so I'm sniffling. Please bear with me. I was given direction to make this presentation to y'all with my colleagues also. I'm not the subject matter expert on the budget, but this is a very preliminary budget overview. We plan to present the more formal budget to you next month. I think May 17th, I believe it is. They'll kind of show a little bit more of the finite details and answer your questions, Mr. English, that you sent in your second email.
Yes.
So staff has started to work on that already, just to make sure we're communicating back to you. Any questions throughout the presentation, please feel free to jump in and ask, and my colleagues, I'm sure, will jump to my defense and help at this time, too. All right, so busy slide shows a historical snapshot. This historical snapshot of the data you've asked for. You see them on your surface. I believe you have paper copies, too. It shows the ridership along the bottom line. It also shows expenses, both the total operating revenue and total operating expenses. And you can see just a downward trend throughout the time period. I mean, what's mitigated, what's caused that? I mean, there are a tremendous amount of environmental pressures. I think, as you said earlier in your email, truly is a difference in Ybor. I mean, I grew up here in Tampa, spent a lot of time here. Ybor cities, changed to a more sustainable model. It's not the party capital like it used to be in the early 2000s, but then again, there's business here, and that's affected ridership too. And I think Steve could probably be a little bit better to explain difference in trends. But as you see, there's been a decline. This year, if you want to look at 17 and look at 18, there's been a bump as a result of the pilot. But there's also been some other events that kind of contributed to that bump, too. So, like I said, this is raw data. This is what you asked for, sir. I mean, if you have any questions on this, we can move to the next slide. We're going to show the graph, kind of a little bit better example, better visual. So if you look here, this is the third chart we're showing right now. It shows a little bit better in a visual way that shows the cost per rider. That's that green line that goes from left to right. It started at $3.79 per ride. It's kind of gone up to $6.79 at the end, 29, excuse me. And, and you see that correlates directly with expenses and also correlates directly with the ridership that's dropping. It costs more to move one person than it costs to move 10 people over time.
Excuse me, do we have this in a paper copy?
I'm sorry, I didn't know.
I don't think we do. It would be nice to have it. It would be nice to have it. It would be nice to have it in paper copy before we leave, if somebody can do that.
Okay. Like I said, I'm hoping this chart, that shows you the more visual of the second chart, kind of answers your questions here as far as your email. Any conversation or questions about some of these numbers? Or?
Not yet. Go on through it, and we'll, I'm sure, have questions.
And kind of the money slide here, as we like to say, adding morning service for a whole year would cost approximately about $440K for the year. And realize what you're asking. It's not just adding the service. I thought we had a conversation with the operations team yesterday. Is you're asking for a change in organization. We have to hire more people permanently. There's going to be more supervision required. Et cetera. More maintenance. Regular maintenance and regular people and equipment. Require the onboarding of additional motormen, supervisors, like we said, increased maintenance of vehicles, and actually infrastructure, too. It's going to have a wear on the infrastructure. The increasing headways for streetcar service to 15 minutes, once again, it would increase the current operation cost to about 25%.
So roughly $500,000.
Roughly, yes, sir.
Okay.
That's a rough order of magnitude. I mean, there's some math behind it, some science behind it. I'm not just throwing a number at you. But realizing you're asking for an organizational change. It's not just adding service.
I understand. Questions?
On this last slide, you've got increasing headways for all streetcar service in 15 minutes would increase the current operating cost by 25%. So the morning service at 440, is that including a 15-minute headway then, or is that just current 20-minute headway? See what I'm saying?
Yes, sir. I do, and I'll have to turn back to my colleagues. 20 minutes is what the 440s count.
20 minutes. So if we added morning service and it was at 15 minutes, it would be 25% more of that 440. Is that how it would work?
What was the number we discussed yesterday?
Yeah, okay. All right. I was just curious about that because doing the morning service and not having it at 15-minute intervals doesn't make a whole hell of a lot of sense.
Right.
In a lot of ways. So.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes. So I asked for this because we had talked about discussing with the city either bringing back morning service, and I think I'm just interested in what you all think. I sent an email with some questions. I was curious about why ridership had fallen, whether there was a relationship between reduced funding and ridership falling off, and I'm not sure I know the answer to that. I mean, I think we certainly peaked in ridership a while back, and it's been dropping little by little ever since. We have been on 20-minute headways and reduced hours for 6 or 7 years now, maybe a little bit longer. So I'm not sure I understand the answer to that question yet. And it's probably important that we at least talk about it. I can't remember when we dropped headways. Does anybody in the audience staff know that? 2011, which was thank you so much, which was that's a pretty big deal, and people have been complaining about it ever since. We also reduced operating hours, which have not been restored, and I don't remember how many operating hours we dropped, but it was reasonably substantial. We are starting a little later in the morning now, I think noon, and it used to be 11, and I think on most days we're running a couple hours less in the evening, so it adds up to a lot of hours that might have had ridership, but we really weren't in a position to afford it any longer. So that relationship is important, and I was kind of curious about why the cost per passenger has gone up. I'm assuming it's because ridership has gone down and costs have not. Costs have escalated according to the terms of our contract with HART. Is that a reasonable assumption?
I mean, I think there's a lot of different ways you could find causation and correlation on that number. I think the reality is you're correct. There's less riders, so the cost per rider is going to increase. There are some increased costs with HART, along with contracts for our operators. Just cost of doing business going to continue to increase over time.
Right.
And then the equipment is frankly old.
So the headways, increasing headways at 15 minutes is something that I think the public wants and has been complaining about not having for some time. Do you have an opinion? And if we went to the city for more money or any place for more money, you'd have to make a pretty good argument that either 15-minute headways would significantly increase ridership or not. And if we, particularly in comparison to morning service, which we know wasn't very high, but it was encouraging. So if you put it back in permanently, would it make a difference? And some of this is framed by the fact that we're doing a very serious streetcar extension study right now that I sense from the city they're serious about, which means if we could improve service in a way that was visible to the public during this next year, while the discussion's really ongoing about the cost and the feasibility of extending the streetcar and turning it into a bigger, better, more robust system, then it seems to me it would be in everyone's best interest for people to feel better about the streetcar service they're receiving. How we pay for that, I'm not certain. We could ask the city for the money. We could ask the port for a reasonable contribution, which they've been reneging on for the last 5 years, 4 or 5 years, or some combination thereof. We could go to the CRA and ask them for some money. It's funny, the CSX cost never really was ours to pay. The city owns the tracks. It was always their responsibility, but we had some money, and so everybody looked at us, and we paid it until the money was gone. Well, if the city picked up the cost of CSX and the port chipped in $150,000, we'd be very close to the $500,000 we need to institute one of these two options. So those are the sort of things that I'm hoping that Mr. Suarez can think about in terms of the City Council and CRA, and Mr. McDonough can think about in terms of how he would advise the mayor, which is why I'm bringing all this up. We really exist at the behest of the city and in HART to a large degree, who also contribute to our capital funding as well as doing other things for us. So I'm really interested in what you all think. I mean, am I speaking into a blind alley here? Am I going to get mugged? Or I think it's time we ask. And we told Bob we were going to have the conversation. He said he would be interested in hearing it, not necessarily agreeing with it. So I'm interested in which option might be easiest to implement, which option do you think would create the most ridership? Are there any other sources of money other than the city that we could ask? I think these are important questions, and we have a group of leaders sitting here. I'd like to know what you think.
I have a question. If we go back to the slide, it has readership versus costs. And my question relates to fiscal year 17, and it talks about the first 6 months, which matches up with our pilot program, all right? So if we take that 170,000 riders and double it, if we were to continue this on for the full year, that puts us at 340. And if you look at when we had 340 riders, or 340,000 riders, that was around 2011, which is the point that we just heard was where we made a big change.
Right.
And so it looks like, just from the math side of things, that would be something that could have a huge impact if we could just continue on with all the parameters we had with the pilot and just make that a year-round process. And that, I don't believe, decreased the headways.
No, it didn't touch the headways.
So that right there, would be probably what we would want, minimum. And then,
well, unless you think that reducing the headways to 15 minutes would dramatically increase ridership. And
I think it would make it better, absolutely. So we might be able to go from that 340 that I'm projecting to maybe 350 or 375.
I would, if I may, I would caution you on using that number, the double that number, because there were some special events this year too. There'd be a national championship. There were 2 other events I can't remember what they were. We actually also saw the big open ridership too. So I would caution that maybe 340 is not correct.
340 wouldn't be correct at all, because you've had You had the, excuse me, I better introduce myself. Steve Fagenbaum, Director of Service Development. You had the German cruise ships. Those are no longer coming in. You had the championship football game. Most of that accounts for the, and then the added ridership within for the morning service. Those are all gone. They're not going to reoccur. So your likely ridership, you're not going to double the 170 unless other circumstances happen. If you look at your trend pretty much since about 2012 or so, FY 2012, it's been very flat. That trend has been very flat. And in the absence of these other things intervening, more service, special events, and so forth, there's no reason to believe that next year would bust that trend one way or the other. There's no reason to believe it would be anything but flat.
Well, if we continued the morning service, so that was something that was a 6-month pilot.
Yeah, it was about a 400 ride per week bump, and most of that was in the 9 to noon area, not the early morning. If you continue that on an annual basis, you had about 400 rides a week. It's about 21,000 for the year. Again, that's not really a significant number. I mean, if you take a look at the overall trend,
excuse me, but if we take our normal, which is just under 300,000, looks like, and take your 40, all right, which came from the morning, and add that on, then we're sitting at about 340.
It'd be about 20,000 over the course of a full year. It's about 400 a week.
Okay.
So for 52 weeks, it'd be about 21,000.
So that still gets us over that line.
A little bit, but it's, yeah, sure, it would. I mean, that would be a new service, something that would intervene and start to trend that line. Hopefully, start to trend the line down.
Right.
And to Dr. Robinson's point, I think there's probable cause that if it were a sustainable morning service and not a pilot, people could make other decisions about parking in certain areas and riding that. But as a pilot, they couldn't give up their monthly parking spaces in downtown in order to maybe have the pilot program be extended or not. Then they weren't going to get their space back. So maybe that could double.
Absolutely.
If it was more sustainable and long term.
Yeah, because the Bank of America building gets packed, that garage,
Yeah.
just as an example.
Other comments?
Just one thing, Steve. A little bit more enthusiasm, okay? I mean, we're trying to get ridership here. So
hey, I'm a planner. I'm not supposed to be. I'm the bad news guy.
Yeah, believe me, I've dealt with enough of the planners. Okay. One of the things that we keep talking about, because it's a diminishing return on this information that we're receiving. Okay. Mike's, Mr. English, Chairman English's point is well taken. We have taken up the brunt of having to pay for things that we didn't think we had to pay for. Unfortunately, the way it was set up and the way the streetcar was set up to fail in that way because they had not worked out all the details. And I know that even though you were around at that time,
I was.
You weren't privy to a lot of the deals that were being made.
Big surprise.
Imagine being on city council and finding the same kind of things that happened on a
regular basis.
Yes, you're not the only one to feel left out on some things. So by creating a system where they had not worked out the deal concerning the cross of the railroad tracks, that cost was an additional cost that no one knew about until after they had actually started, literally just before they started operation. It caused that to snowball all the way through. I believe that if we had kept the headways at 15 minutes and had expanded our hours, we would be seeing a lot more riders, but also the cost per passenger trip, because economies of scale and everything else comes into play, and then all of a sudden reduces that cost. Short of us pumping in $500,000 ourselves, because Mr. McDonough knows where all the money is hidden in the CRA budget, as he tells us every single time. Look, in fact, he got injured because he was arguing with somebody about where that money was hidden.
Carrying the CRA's wallet.
Yes, that's right. He carries the wallet. Short of us doing a $500,000 ask of either the city, the CRAs, or in combination of the two, is there any other scenario where you see where we can actually bring those numbers up and actually provide the service without having to come up with the $440,000 plus the 25% on top of the $440 in order to extend the hours? I mean, what are your thoughts? Because we're at a blank wall here. I've got some ideas. I don't know if it'll work in terms of the CSX, but that's going to be a long-term solution. It's not something that's simple. In terms of dollars, I mean, CRA can put money into it, but if we're not getting the ridership anyway, we don't want to throw money at it. We just spent money on a pilot project to put people on a boat, and I don't have any problem with CRA dollars going towards these type of things, and maybe even splitting it up among a couple of the CRAs. But we may have to look at an assessment, more of a special assessment, because EBOR and Channelside has changed significantly in terms of the number of people that live here now, and we may want to look at that, in addition to some other avenues of trying to raise some money. I mean, for us, the CRA, we're still trying to pay off things that we built from before, and we're looking at what the future is going to look like, and whether or not we're going to put the kind of dollars into this through our CRA dollars.
May I?
Oh, Mickey, sure.
So I'm conflicted in a great way as somebody who is a vocal proponent of options of transit in our community, and somebody who, quite frankly, I use the morning service, especially to come here. I thought, wouldn't it be cool if I could ride the streetcar to the HART board meeting? Wouldn't that be just the kind of the coolest thing? And it was while the morning service was going on. And so I thought it was terrific. I thought it was a big benefit. And then as somebody who sits on this board and has a fiscal responsibility to the dollars that we have to spend them economically and in the right way, I'm conflicted as to continuing the service based on the ridership performance, regardless of what the issues are to get riders on there. The cold hard facts is we didn't get enough riders that justified the costs that we're seeing today, obviously, which is it's a shame. Our community deserves better, and I think we deserve better. I wonder over time when I look at cities like Pittsburgh, when their mayor, Mike, help me out. Remember?
Perduto.
Pardon me? No, the former one, the former mayor that's doing all the speaking.
The guy that does all the planning stuff now?
Yeah, you know who I'm talking about.
Yeah,
Anyways, he was the mayor. He was the mayor that took the risk to put into place some very aggressive public transit systems, and it was took a lot of heat at the time. Was not very popular, but in the end, now Pittsburgh has a pretty robust public transit system, including I think a free subway system within the city limits. I ask ourselves, is it time for us to take a deep look, and is it time for us to take those kinds of risks for this community on behalf of the community and look at, do we implement this? Do we find ways to pay for it? Do we become the vocal advocates for it? Or are we strictly just on the side of fiscal responsibility? And we all get various opinions from various people within the community on that. But I am at a point where with the work that we're doing in the community and my industry and the support it's going to need from public transit, I fear that if we don't do this, we may never go back to it. And that's my biggest fear. And I understand the issues with the dollars. I get it. I run a business. I understand budgets. But in the end, is it worth the investment, the initial investment, and can we over time get a return on investment? Because nothing, I think the community looks at it, if it's not full every day, day one coming out, it's a failure, and we've got to look at it a little differently. So I would really love to hear more discussion about, is it time for us to take that kind of risk to push this forward, and as the density increases in our city, and we all know it's happening, and it's happening at a tremendous rate, would it be too late to do this once we get that density? You know what I mean? Is it too late at that point? Do people suddenly have habits when they come in and live in this dense environment that if we try to put it in later on when we finally get the density, can we change behavior that is created because we don't have it now?
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I know the answer. Tom Murphy was.
Tom Murphy,
There
thank
you
you.
go.
Thank you. I
I
knew it
don't
was
know the answer to
Tom.
all
I
this other
couldn't-
stuff. I mean, I know that answer.
Thank you. It was Tom Murphy.
And you know, and I will tell you, Nikki, you make a very good point. There's a lot of things that are happening now that when this was first instituted, this streetcar, none of the technology was available that has changed the face of a lot of different cities across the country. And the problem that we have is there's a vice that we are at, which is the one side is the cost to run the streetcar and the cost that it will take to extend it and expand it. And then the other vice is whether or not we can stop with the streetcar and actually have to pay back dollars that we have received from the federal government. That is, really the kind of weird place that we're in right now. And I don't think we can do one of those, which is stop running the streetcar. So if we're not going to stop running the streetcar, we've got to find a solution that both looks at how much we're going to have to pay to actually continue to run it and what the right hours and mix of those hours are and where we get those dollars to do it. So the hardest part is always the operating dollars because nothing runs without a subsidy, no kind of transportation. So we just need to figure that out. I know that doesn't sound too promising, but that's the way it is now, and we need to figure out where we need to go with it from that point forward. And then the maintenance costs, of course, you mentioned, that's never going to end, especially with the type of streetcar we run. Can we, and this is the question, can we look at phasing out the current streetcar fleet that we have with other types of regular modern streetcars on the gauge of track that we currently have? Is that a possibility? And now this is where the technical guys have to come up with the answer. Well, somebody's a technical guy around here somewhere.
Well, no, but that's what the consultants are doing right now.
Yeah, I understand that, but the problem is that when the consultants come in, they're going to look at a lot of different things. It's a simple answer, which is, yes, you can get some streetcars. That's A. And then B, what's the cost to run a different type of streetcar on this particular system, whether it is whether it's going to be something for the future or something as a gap between what happens after that study comes through, because the study's going to come through and then they're going to lay it down on our desk and say, okay, this is what you have and this is what it's going to cost and this is where you need to try and get money, and then that's another 5 years down the road before we even see those dollars coming in. That's part of the problem, which is if we start to solve this problem now, we may or may not make it much tougher for us to solve the problem 10 years from now, because you have one expectation, then you have to change it. The capital costs have to come in, and then you have to look and see what does this mean? How much is that going to actually cost? So the study is going to be a big help to trying to figure some of this out, but it's not going to be the be-all and end-all. That's the problem. So you have answers, I can tell.
I just want to throw one caveat in there.
There's too many caveats in here. Let's do something else.
Under FTA standards, they are a 30-year vehicle. So we are obligated to the FTA for quite a few more years on the current vehicles.
Where are we at on the 30 years?
2002 to now, so we're about halfway.
Halfway through?
But you can trade them out, right?
David, did you have a question?
Yeah. Can we?
With other cities?
I'm curious, I have not heard anything about the issue of demand. And is the demand there, and how much of the fall off is associated with loss of demand, and how much of it is associated with loss of investment into operating expenses?
Well, and that was one of the questions I asked, and I'm not hearing yet from HART an answer. I don't know.
Because if the demand's there, then presumably there's a sweet spot in terms of cost-benefit ratio.
Yeah.
If you don't know what the demand is, it's hard to make judgments about exactly whether you should invest further or not.
Yeah.
To make sure I understand your question clearly, demand by hour? You're talking about service times? Is that what you're asking?
General demand, customer demand for ridership.
You mean just people choosing to go on and use it, not regardless of what the operating is?
I mean, the data suggests that you had a lot of riders for the first 7 or 8 years, and then it dropped off dramatically. The question is that due to demand, or is that due to pulling back on service?
So
Just a little history, pulling back on the service. When the streetcar was first started, its schedule remained consistent, which was 15-minute frequency Monday through. I won't go through the whole schedule. That schedule remained consistent. In November 2007, there was the first change to the schedule. There was a very minor change. It was a little bit of a change in span. I think it had to do more with bringing, at the end of the day, the way the vehicles were brought back in. So it was very minor. Now, in November 2008, there was a change. Again, it was in the span of service. The Thursday streetcar, which had run from 11 to 11, was changed. It folded in with Monday through Wednesday, which was running from 11 to 10. The Friday, Saturday, so it was relatively minor. The first major change in the overall schedule and operating of it was in October of 2011. It's when the schedules were changed Monday through Thursday. Instead of starting at 11, they started at noon and went to 10, as they were doing. The Friday and Saturday, Friday remained at 11 a.m. to 2 a.m. Saturday was cut from 9 a.m. start to 11 a.m. start. Sunday has always remained noon to 8, but that's also when the frequency was changed from 15 minutes or 4 cars to 20 minutes and 3 cars. Now, if you're looking, again, I got to give the numbers. The ridership decline had already begun. It had already been in progress for 3 years prior to that change. It actually started, if you go back to 2009, don't kill the messenger. But if you go back to 2009, there was an increase in ridership, but over 30,000 of that was due to the Super Bowl. That we got as much in one weekend of that Super Bowl than as we would get on a normal month. So it essentially added a month. So if you factored that out, that was down. So prior to that change was fiscal year 2012. Prior to that, you had it started in 9, 10, 11. You already had 3 years of decline,
which would be demand related.
Yeah. So it is. So is it related? And is it related to the amount of service? I mean, you always get. Usually, you get the more service you put out, the more you get. Is it? I mean, you could go through why did it decline? Is it that the community was here? It was. It's at these hours, and they said, okay, been there, done that. I don't know. I really don't. I think it takes a little more in depth, and also to really look at what your markets are, to really be able to go and intelligently answer some of those questions on that. I mean, looking at the numbers alone is probably not it. There's also demographics, how much population and employment. Transit is generally driven by population and employment density within a quarter mile and where it goes and so forth. So, but some of that's been increasing like in the down.
Yeah,
in the
Steve,
so I think it's not a question you can answer right now.
Gotcha. Thank you,
David. There's a sidebar answer to part of your comment and part of Steve's comments, and that is that the recession. In the first place, it was popular when it started because it was built for visitors. Not just tourists, but people who lived in the region who hadn't had a streetcar in 50 years. So it was very popular for the first few years, just on that basis. Everybody wanted to ride a streetcar. Then, we got into some schedule changes, some service reductions, and we got into the worst recession in 50 years. And people stopped spending money. They stopped coming to Tampa. There are a lot of reasons why demand fell off, including the recession, including it wasn't the newest toy, including we were reducing service. And my point in raising all these questions is this. See, I don't think buying new cars and retrofitting this building and all that business makes any sense whatsoever unless the city decides, after this study concludes, to make a major capital investment in conjunction with DOT and FTA, and bites the bullet on operating cost. I mean, This system is going to be 3 times as expensive if it gets to be a bigger, fancier system, and we're not funding it correctly today. And we may never bite the bullet on the new system. So my point is, why don't we spend a little bit more money and make the service better? Because the other thing that's changed is that original alignment was picked because it was the only alignment that would work for the people that wanted to build it. It's where the tourists were. The aquarium, the convention center, boom, 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 cruise ships. There was nobody living in Ybor except a handful of very low-income people who were so upset about the possibility of paying a special assessment that we removed anybody who had a homestead exemption from paying the assessment. They were the only people that lived in Ybor. No one lived in the Channel District. The only people that lived in downtown were Laurel Place. Nobody lived in in the vast urban center. It was only for tourists and visitors. So what's happened today? Huge, huge. We must have, 25,000 new residents, another 15 or 20,000 new workers, maybe more in the urban center. And we have a streetcar that has been underfunded now for a while, since we had to stop putting that extra $500,000 a year in it. Is my only point. So if you took $400,000 or $500,000 and you applied it where you think you would get the best ridership, I think it would be a good investment. The question is, does the city think that? Because we may never build a new streetcar system. I think the likelihood is we could, but I don't know. But meanwhile, this conversation is going to drag on for a couple years about whether we move forward. And I would think that the current mayor will help make some decisions. The next mayor will decide and the city council will decide to build or not. Meanwhile, a relatively modest amount of money put back in our budget would dramatically improve service, either in the morning or improved headways or some combination thereof. That's my point.
(2018), our next fiscal year, we will still not receive as much in property taxes as we did in 2008. We got $166 million. We have not gotten the same amount of property taxes in the last 10 years. Cumulatively, the difference is greater than $280 million. We just sent letters out to all the not-for-profits that the city funds, saying that this year we might not be able to fund them at the same levels. So this modest $400,000, which might help, maybe could, would, is an ask when we're really pretty tight right now on money.
Well, I don't think this is an ask out of your general fund, to be honest with you.
You said the city, the cumulative city.
Well, the city, but you're sophisticated. There are a lot of ways that this amount of funding could be generated, including from the CRAs, including from the port. I can't make this happen. Only a couple people in town can make this happen. I'm putting it on the table. If you and the man you work for choose not to do it, then there's not a thing I can do about it.
We're spending $1 million on a streetcar study. I would think it might behoove us to see what the results are of the streetcar study, because it's not just an extension, it's a study of the system and what people's riderships, they're going out and speaking to a lot of people in the public. Let's find out what people want, as opposed to supposing what they want and spending money to see if maybe it works and maybe it doesn't.
Well, you're going to have the answers to those questions before our next budget year.
Well, let's see when we have the answers.
I mean, in June, they're supposed to have pretty much figured out what they want to take to FTA. So that's well before our next budget year. And all I'm suggesting is that you all be open to the idea, because I'm absolutely convinced that more money would be better, would be well served in this system. I have been a long time. Mm-hmm. You said, let's talk about it. Well, we are. That's all. Mm-hmm. Now, we probably should give the HART staff a little bit of direction, because they're going to have a draft budget for us in May. And the city's budgets are coming together now. The CRA budgets are coming together now. So if we're going to ask for money, I would suggest to you all that we ask HART to include a more refined series of alternatives that could include better headways all day long or at peak, that could include morning service, and set them as an aside so you see what our bare budget is, and you put those options forward, and then you decide in May whether, if at all, you want to send those requests to the mayor. If the mayor doesn't want to do it, then it ain't going to happen. if the mayor sees the logic in it, it might happen.
Well, again, the mayor doesn't have a say-so in the CRA budget, so don't.
Well, we have a CRA member here.
Don't confuse that issue.
Mhm.
They're two separate issues.
I understand.
That was a classic push to me.
Well, no, I know.
That's how I hurt my elbow.
I didn't say you hurt your elbow.
Right back over the neck.
Under the streetcar. instead of under the
That's,
bus.
I mean, I'm really glad you're back on this board because you needed to hear all this.
I agree. And Michael, you know, the thing is laying out the case for or against a streetcar is pretty well known. I mean, I think we all agree that I don't think we would have seen the development of parts of Channelside and Ybor and
In the south end.
in the South End without, you know, the streetcar. I mean, I really believe it. I think that there are some people that may have their own doubts, but I think having it there as an amenity was important. It also, and God love the Germans. Why are they not coming back here? Because we need them.
Every week.
Never said in Belgium. Belgium, they never said that. Anyway, you know, for us, the idea of the streetcar is good. It's whether or not, and I don't know when the streetcar studies can be done. I don't know if it'll be done before our fiscal year starts.
Part 1 is going to be done in June-ish.
June-ish, yeah. Okay. So it may come up that, listen, this is what it's going to cost to extend it. And then we still have to figure out what the dollars are going to mean, because everyone goes under the expectation that the federal government is going to play a role in this. And now we've got a new president who wants to completely get rid of, community development block grants, which is what Bob just touched on, which is our discretionary funds that we give to nonprofits. Comes 100% from there. So now we're stuck in what do we do with our own budget with some of the federal dollars that we deal with?
Right.
Plus, what are we going to deal with in terms of FTA? I've heard some good things about the DOT's new secretary, but that doesn't mean that she's the one that's going to actually continue the same policies that we had before. So we're really in a very weird situation, even worse than we were before, because at least we knew something was going to happen.
Right.
At least we knew there were some things that we could go after. Now, I don't know what we're going to be able to do in terms of federal dollars, and frankly, the state dollars, they're all over the dang map right now, and they sure as heck don't want to spend money in cities, and that's a real big problem that we have. So we may have to go on our own. By the way, they attack CRAs. I think you probably know that.
Right.
Yeah, one guy wants to eliminate them all. Another one wants to, significantly squeeze us financially so that we can't actually extend our the amount of dollars that we're able to get, the bonding dollars. So for us, we're really in a weird situation now. I agree that what you said, Mike, that I think it is imperative that the city and our other local government, even the county, get involved in trying to solve this problem, because it isn't going to be off of our budget alone from the city. It's not only going to be from CRAs. It's going to have to be a combination of a lot of different sources, because there's no way we're going to be able to cobble something together depending on the federal government or on the state government. So we need to do it on our own. And hopefully that study will help us get some answers on where we might be able to get those dollars. And if I see a study that says, FTA dollars say this, or small starts, or new starts, or whatever, I think I'm going to just vomit, because I don't think anybody knows what the hell's going to happen right now. I really don't. And we're really stuck in a really bad situation. And I said really about a lot of times there. So anyway, hopefully you all will come back, as the chair mentioned, come back with some creative ideas in which we do some of this stuff, because I know that there are streetcars and transit systems that have started in the last few years, last 5 years or less, that are now operating. And their 5-year plans are going to be coming up soon, and they're going to have to figure out what to do in terms of some of the additional capital costs and other things. Most of them are getting a lot of help from their state governments or from their local governments. So we just need to know what that option is, and then we need to figure it out on our budget cycle for the city and also for our CRAs. So,
Thank you so much.
So the answer is there is no answer, Michael.
There's no answer. I understand.
I knew Tom Murphy's name, so that's the key.
That's a good thing, Michael.
Sure,
May I jump in? I think conflicted. I said that already. But I think it's important to understand what those costs are. I think asking staff to come up with the scenarios that we've asked you, the various scenarios that we think what the dollars would be necessary to cover the scenarios is important, because without that, I don't think we can make an informed ask or an informed decision on what this is. So I think I would agree that, and I hope all of you do, that asking staff to do that, taking that step so we understand exactly what those costs are based on the level of service for those different times that Chair English talked about, I think is important to know, because without that information, we're just speculating. So I think that's a good thing, and at that point, let's hope that we can we can find a way to make a decision on what we think is going to be best moving forward with this. I think this is a terrific asset for the city. I've always thought that. I hope we can find a way to do it, but having the necessary information, I think, is the good first step to give us an informed decision on where we're going with it, and be able for us to be able to lobby on behalf of that with the people who are going to be making those decisions, and hopefully with new people who have the capability to throw more funding at it than they haven't in the past.
Thank you, Mickey. Wallace?
Certainly, I think this is a very important project for our city, and although things have changed over the years, and we come up with all the neat things we want to do, I would like to see, in addition to that, a projection of demand to go with this, so we'll know kind of some idea of what the demand is, so we can match the two.
Okay. Gentlemen?
Projection of demand, anticipated demand.
Yes.
Well, particularly if we add any service.
I mean, I guess, I'm a military background guy, okay, so you got to understand your environment. We're looking over from 2000 whatever to start till now, what the environment is in demand and produced because during that time. We can look at anticipated demand based upon population coming in and jobs, realizing that it's a rough order of magnitude answer. Let's make sure we're clear of that before staff starts working on it. That's what you want, sir?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, please.
Could you also, at the next meeting or next time we report in, let us know what the amount owed would be if service were to be discontinued?
For the assets, is that correct? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll give that the finance side. I'll look at it. Yes. Okay. So this is going to clarify guidance to staff. We understand the options we can get back to you. Anticipation of demand, as best as we can, in rough order of magnitude. We'll talk to our finance crew as far as making sure we understand what an asset payback would be if we just stopped, or a course of action of, the end of Streetcar, is what you're asking.
Yes.
Right. Okay. I think we can do that. Thank you. There are no further questions. I'd like to remind you that we're doing a lot of positive things. Mr. Jacobs really kind of set up first. I mean, I rode the streetcar this weekend too. I went to the Storm game. It was a lot of fun, and it's one of my favorite things to do here in town. We're putting Wi-Fi on the streetcars this summer. Flamingo, the project that I work with. I mean, we started selling the streetcar only passes, and quite honestly, it's successful. I have a meeting with the oh my gosh, I forgot the gentleman's name, about putting ATMs at each of the TVN locations. So, it's doom and gloom, and I realize it's a money thing, and it's a fiscal constraints we got, and, understands leadership. But, I think it's a very positive spin. The community likes the streetcar. It's a good thing. And I think we're doing well with it. Frankly, from the HART perspective, I love coming to work and seeing Greg Fracking downstairs and seeing all the things they do. That's fun. So, depending on your question, that's all I had for you.
Any other questions? Thank you, gentlemen. It's been very helpful.
Thank you.
Direct media sales report.
I think we do better when Lori's not here, so I'm going to ask her to stay away next month also.
Okay.
Red Bull is going to be posting on June 12th, and 2 full reps, and that streetcar revenue is $5,400, and it'll be 1 month. And pending is the National Defense Industrial Association posting, May 1st, 6 panels, streetcar revenue of $1,080, so $7,200.
That's great. Great.
So we're going to keep her away as much as we can.
That's great.
Make her beat the street.
Thank you, Steve. Information item, River O Green. I don't know what that's about. Steve? Here's our activities guy.
Good afternoon, Marco Sandusky, Senior Manager, EEO and Community Programs. President English, you may recall that in March we asked ask for you to approve for the River of Green event in Curtis Dixon Park. They had a scavenger hunt this year.
Right.
And we, HART helped by sponsoring the event, and we
right.
were requesting to be billed at half price for the actual ride. So we ended up having 67 people ride the streetcar as part of the scavenger hunt, and we're asking the board if they could ratify the 50% discount to HART, so that HART would be paid would pay $83.75, and THS would pay the other $83.75.
I can't approve the 440,000, but the 83.
We have a motion. We have a motion. We have a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Thank you so much.
Sorry, Barbara.
All right, compliance reports. Anybody have any questions? If not, any old business? Any new business?
I'm sorry, I do have a bit of old business.
All right.
I have asked Director McDonough again to talk to the mayor about finding a replacement for me. So
Good, that's good. Well, we're so happy you're still coming, though. We like your smiling face.
thank you. I like all of your smiling faces.
There is no replacement for you.
New business, any new business? If not, a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Meeting is adjourned.
Thank you. Good discussion.